Okay, well, welcome everyone to another episode of the Hashtags and Habits podcast. My name is Danny White, and today I'm happy to welcome Jordan Schanda King to the podcast. Am I saying your middle name correctly?
You nailed it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, Jordan is a serial entrepreneur and an expert on all things scaling. Since first diving into entrepreneurship over 10 years ago, she has published a book, founded multiple businesses, My Kind of Woman, and launched a top 100 podcast and successfully sold a brand. Most recently, she built a $500,000 agency in 2 years while pregnant and juggling two young toddlers. Jordan's company, Easy Scaling, combines strategic business consulting with done-for-you execution from a team of more than a dozen experts. Jordan and her team help women scale without burning out so that they can build a sustainable business that they love. Jordan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, so tell us more about who you are. Who is Jordan beyond the bio?
Well, top of mind, Jordan is constantly pregnant. So I'm currently 8 months pregnant. I'm about to embark on my second maternity leave in this business, and this business is not even 3 years old yet. So
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're able to join us. Still 8 months. You seem like you are like going strong.
yeah, I feel pretty good. No complaints, no major complaints.
Awesome. Well, this makes baby number 3, right?
This is baby number 3. Yep.
Wow. Are you going for a big family, or is this gonna be the last one?
It changes every day. It's like, how am I feeling in that day? How adorable were the kids, or how difficult were the kids that day? We'll see. We wanted 3, and so we're doing that, and who knows what will happen after this.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to talk about a topic today that's really critical for businesses and especially small business owners. I think almost every business wants to scale to some point, a point that they're comfortable with. And I want to just talk about what is scaling? Like, how do you go about business scaling? How do you help your clients to scale in a way that allows them not to be burnt out and allows them to feel comfortable and stable within their business?
Yeah. So first, I'll just define scaling, at least how I like to define scaling, which is more revenue, more impact, less time, right? So less inputs generally.
Yeah.
And so that I think is critical. I think a lot of times when people think about scaling, they're thinking kind of about a particular benchmark, a particular, revenue goal. A lot of people talk about $1 million business, a 7-figure business, and that's fantastic. And it's really kind of why we created Easy Scaling, is because we know that the actual statistics around women-owned businesses are quite abysmal. Yeah. 90% of women-owned businesses make less than 100K in revenue, gross revenue per year. Less than 2% are making over $1 million. So it's scaling is, on the one hand, whatever you want to make it. But I think a lot of women really have their eye on that $1 million mark, or at least high 6 figures, something that is a legacy for their family, something that is creating generational wealth. And so that's what we're trying to help women do. But we know that it's actually quite rare for women to be able to do that.
For sure. Absolutely. Because it is rare, like it's rare for even just small businesses in general to like get past that 6-figure mark.
Yep.
How do you help take your clients from maybe a little less than 6 figures or right at that 6-figure mark to approaching that 7-figure, 8-figure mark in their organization?
So we take a very holistic approach. And this is what I've found, just because I'm very fortunate to sit in a seat that gets to witness what a lot of businesses are doing that are doing well, right? So I get to look for patterns. Like, I'm very analytical, I'm very nerdy. And so over the years, I've been working with women-owned businesses for many, many years, but in this particular business, working as a COO behind the scenes, doing implementation, doing strategy for almost 3 years now. And we see patterns. And in particular, we see that a holistic approach is always what works. There
Yeah.
is no business that is scaling, truly scaling by doing one thing, like one fluke thing, right?
Yeah.
It's the businesses that are being strategic. They're making decisions from a holistic perspective. They're not just looking for kind of like one solution or like chasing these shiny objects, which I don't want to like say too many bad things about shiny objects because we all do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But ultimately, slowing down, looking at your business as an ecosystem and tackling all facets of it and making decisions from that place is what allows these women to truly scale.
Gotcha. Why do you think businesses or women-owned businesses particularly struggle to prioritize scaling over the shiny object syndrome, chasing all of the trends, or even just prioritize making revenue, getting to a certain point in their revenue journey over all of the other little tasks that often keep us busy and keep us from growing the business?
It's tough. I wish I knew the answer to that. And we are working very hard to gather hard data on this. This is like
Mhm.
this next thing that we're working on. We obviously get to do cool stuff with our CO and team clients and our students in our programs, but we're actually trying to gather hard data to try to figure this out because we know that it's a problem, but we don't necessarily know why it's a problem.
Mhm.
I have a little bit of a hunch. I think it's many things, but I think in particular, the marketing atmosphere, the online space atmosphere that a lot of women are in, I think is very noisy. And I think it's very misleading in a lot of ways that actually it's like this age of the internet, this age of like content and like constant information. I think we're
Yes.
just bombarded with a lot of things that we're being told that we should do. And it's not grounded and rooted in like a solid scaling strategy. And so it's just kind of constantly in our face. Like, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this. And I don't know if we as women are more susceptible to that or if it's just the nature of being an online entrepreneur or being in small business in this age right now, but
Mhm.
that's like where my hunch is, but we're going to get some data on it.
Awesome. I love a good data report on on some of these things. Um, you talk about some of the six core areas that are critical for sustaining a business in its scaling mode. What are those six areas, and how do you guide clients through those six areas? I'm assuming it's not all at once, little bit by little bit, but how do you get to fulfilling all six of them?
Yeah. So the six core areas are leadership, offers, visibility, operations, planning, and sales. And all of these areas work together with the other areas. I was just having a conversation with someone the other day about building a team. And I'm like, well, building a team it's not just operations and it's not
Yeah.
just leadership. And it also relates to your offers. And like it's so, everything is so intertwined in our business.
Mhm.
And that is why you have to keep your eye on all six of these things. We're not ever just fixing one problem, right? And that's why
Yeah.
sometimes people make a decision and then actually it backfires and causes other problems in other areas that they didn't foresee, right? So knowing what the six areas are is part of it.
Mhm.
Uh, Again, I'm a big data nerd, so we go straight to assessment and like
Yeah.
gathering information and gathering data about a business. So in all of our programs with all of our clients, we have them take our assessment. So we have a proprietary assessment. It's called the BSAT.
Okay.
Anyone can take it. It's totally free. And it will assess your business on all of these areas and tell you which ones are your weakest, which ones are your strongest, and
Mhm.
actually show you kind of how you self-rated, which ones you need to potentially focus on. Now, that's a starting point. Everyone should do that, but then you
Yeah.
need to dig into these low areas. Usually there's like one or two in particular that are much lower than all of the others.
Mhm.
And then it needs to become a conversation or exploration. You need to get curious on like, okay, why is this area or why are these two areas causing me problems? Is there any kind of thread here? Is there any kind of pattern? Like that's the process that we're going through
Mhm.
with all of our clients. And what we do internally for our business as well is we're looking at the data and then we're seeing, okay, what are we learning from this data? Like
Yeah,
what how can we like piece this together to make sense so that we know what to focus on, what needs to change?
gotcha. In those 6 areas, like where do you on average see the lowest among business owners?
Planning.
Okay.
Yeah. Planning, hands down, which is so funny. It's probably my favorite area. I'm big on planning. I absolutely love it. All kinds of planning, 5-year planning, annual planning, quarterly planning, like you name it. Like we love it.
Yeah.
Most business owners, I think, because typically business owners are visionaries, they're idea people, they're creatives. They're creatives in one way or another, even if you're not, a quote unquote typical
Mhm.
creative, you're still a visionary often as a business owner. And so slowing down to do planning is very difficult.
Yeah.
Business owners usually don't like to do that.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, most people
But
can.
yeah, I have so many ideas like going a mile a
Yep.
minute, and it's like, okay, well, you need to actually plan and tell people what to do and get people on board. Like, but yeah, what are some of the common pitfalls that business owners encounter, like when they're trying to scale or they're going through these 6 areas, and how can we preempt some of that?
Yeah, I think each area kind of has its own common pitfalls. So, like when I think about planning, a lot of times the reason why business owners aren't planning is because they think that it means they have to commit to something and they can't change their mind, or it's like going to be written in stone, or it doesn't give them the flexibility that I think they like as visionary business owners. But that's not true. So like a lot of these things are just not true. And so across the board, I would say there's a lot of like permission giving that I often have to do in my role to be like, well, we can do this however you want to do it. Like if you want to, we create an annual plan every year for our business. We don't stick to our annual plan, right?
Yeah,
Like it's there to
yeah,
guide us. It's not there to dictate what we do. It's supposed to be helpful, but it's not set in stone. So it's a lot of permission giving. I think in particular for women, we wear the weight of like the shoulds, like we have to be do if we're going to do something, we have to do it like this,
hmm,
and so that can trip people up a lot. um Generally having support, I think, is a huge gap for
yeah,
women, and having the right kind of support. We mindset, and leadership, like that big bucket, is a huge problem. And what's interesting is that the data doesn't show that it's as big of a problem as it actually is. And this
hmm,
is what's cool about having like hard data from our BSAT and then also getting to see what our students are taking action on in real time inside of our programs. People will not rate themselves on mindset, but the mindset calls are the ones that they show up to every time. And the mindset support is what they're tapping into the most. It's
oh
very
wow,
interesting. It's
yeah,
very, very interesting. So there's like a little bit of an issue with just how aware are you of like what the
hmm.
real problem is, which is why, again, like having the right support and getting super curious about what's going on is so important.
That's really interesting because I've been on a few like coaching mindset calls with, other coaches, and like those are always full. Like everyone shows up to them, shows up to
Yeah.
those. But when you ask like, okay, what's your core problem in business? Like what's your challenge? What are you trying to solve for? It's like, oh, I'm trying to solve for hiring people, or
Uh-huh.
I need,
Yeah.
it's never mindset.
It's never mindset.
Yeah, it's never
Yeah.
mindset. That's super interesting. So you've built several businesses. You built a $500,000 agency, which is super successful in and of itself in the agency world, because I also run an agency as well. And I want to know, like, what are what are some of the findings or learnings that you've gone through in just building a business or several businesses yourself? And what did that scaling process look like for you?
Um, it's messy. It's a messy process, and it's been so helpful for what we do for our clients for me to have gone through this process so rapidly,
Mm,
because almost everything that comes up as women are scaling a business, I'm like, yep, we've done that. We've faced
Yeah.
that problem. Yep. And if we haven't, then we have a client who has, so it's just, it is messy for everyone. I think a lot of times we want scaling to be linear. We want there to be like a particular way to do it. Everybody wants there to be like a formula or a process or a whatever it is. And ultimately what we have found is that it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of being open to experimenting
Mhm.
and iterating and getting data and just being okay with the process being messy. I think that's honestly like the biggest asset that we have in our business, and like our team in particular knows how important this is that
Mhm.
we're not afraid to try things. Like we know for a fact that it's never going to break the business if we execute on a bad idea. We're going to know very quickly if it was a good or a bad idea. And so that kind of approach to business, I think, has been really, really helpful for us in particular.
Gotcha. Was there ever a point in any of your business building where you were like, I don't know that I want to scale? Because I've had this conversation with a few business owners, and they're like, is the work worth it,
Mm.
worth going to a certain point in revenue? Is the burnout worth it? Is the stress worth it? Are the people worth it? Like, just kind of questioning that entire process. And I want to know if there ever was a point where you're like, I don't know that I want to go that far.
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. Like I think, and that's the other thing. When I say it's messy, I don't just mean like it's messy in process. I mean it's heavy, it's difficult. Like being a business owner is hard work, especially mentally and emotionally, especially for women. And this is like going back to your question, like why are these statistics so abysmal?
Yeah.
And I mean, everyone has their own opinions on this. I'm a super emotional person, super emotional. Like one day I'm like, this is the best thing in the world. The next day I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Like, this is terrible. I hate it. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I personally have had like a very, very like in-depth, close relationship with a mindset coach since before I started this business. And I don't think I would own a business without her, right? Because it's that hard. Like the
Yeah.
ups and downs, the emotional roller coaster of entrepreneurship are no joke. And anyone who like says otherwise, I just like don't believe them.
Don't believe.
And even if it's true, it's just
Yeah.
not common. Like it's just not common. Like we as women are most of us, I think, are emotional beings, and it's a real asset, and it's something that's like like I think it's so beautiful, like the attachment I have to my team, and like the fulfillment that I get from a lot of the things that I do. But it's also very hard on a regular basis. Absolutely.
Yeah. And talking about the mindset piece of it, like, I mean, there are times where I'm like, okay, one day I'm like, okay, we're going to reach for the stars. And then the other day I'm like, oh, no, no, we're not. Let's just stay on the ground. Like, let's not go that far. So, like, how do you, and I can imagine a lot of small business owners, a lot of women, let's just say that, a lot of women business owners, like moms, wives, business owners, they have to do all the things on top of running a business. They can be overwhelmed by the prospect of like, okay, let's scale, let's get this business to a point that it's a $500,000 business, it's $1 million, it's a multi-million dollar business. Where do you think we should start when it comes to like the mindset shifts and
Hmm.
being consistent in that this is the journey we're going to take? Like, okay, we're agreeing that this is the journey we're going to take, but how do we get from like the days that we just want to stay on the ground to the days we're like, okay, we're going to shoot for the stars here?
Yeah. I think, a lot of it is just taking it one day at a time. I think being really committed to having consistent support is very important. It's why I do work with the same person that I've always worked with, because she has all of the context on like everything that I've done and
Yeah.
how my brain works. And what's really cool to see is I'm a totally different person now than I was, when I started working with her over 3 years ago.
Mm.
And a lot of how I see the I mean, you could say it's qualitative. To me, it feels quantitative. The difference in who I am as a person is the smaller amounts of time that I'm in those like moments of what am I doing? This is a
Mm,
mistake. I don't want to do this anymore. Like they are they're shorter, maybe it's like a 24-hour period or a 5-hour period or something that
mm,
I'm like just totally freaking out versus
yeah,
like a week or multiple weeks where I'm just like totally down. That is obvious to me that that has changed over time. And so I think part of it is just a practice and taking it one day at a time and being really committed to like, no, I know that this is a mindset problem. This isn't actually, there's not a problem with me as a business owner or as a person. I
mm,
just need to practice being comfortable with risk and being comfortable, like, just practicing those things that are just going to naturally be part of owning a business that maybe don't come naturally to me, or I haven't practiced them enough to be really good at them. But over time, I have totally changed who I am and
yeah,
how I experience those moments, and they're fewer and farther between, right?
yeah.
And I think if you keep actively working on that, like I tell people all the time that I, on the one hand, believe so deeply that my success is inevitable, but on the other hand, I'm filled with doubt all the time. And like
Hmm.
also just being okay with that, knowing that that is normal, I
Yeah.
think is helpful.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful. I always tell people that like your business can only grow to the level that you grow as a person, and going through those mindset shifts and changing, like being able to change your mind about things, like, and also to live in that uncomfortable space of, yes, on the one hand this is true, but on the other hand this is what I feel, and two things can be true at once at certain
Yeah,
times, right? So,
absolutely.
and getting through that mentally is like what a lot of people don't talk about.
Yeah.
It's just like go for the 8 figures, go for the 9 figures, and it's like no, you have to overcome a lot of mental hurdles to even get there in real life.
Yep.
Um, I want to switch gears just slightly and ask you about the brand that you sold. I think with scaling also comes exit strategies, and how did you get to the point of actually selling a business first? Because women rarely do that too.
Yeah.
And how did you exit that business and decide to like start a whole nother business?
Yeah. It's so interesting that you bring this up because I just connected with a gal who this is what she does is like she helps women exit companies. And you think that the statistics I'm named off were bad. Like she's like, this just never happens. Like
It never
women do not sell
happened.
companies. And
Yeah.
part of what she's trying to do is raise awareness about the fact that an exit is an exit, and it's not about how much money you make. You hear all these big, it's the same thing as in the online space. You hear these big numbers and these big stories of like this huge X million dollar,
Yeah.
multi-million dollar exit. And that's not the experience that I had. I was just thrilled that I was able to build something that somebody wanted. You know what I like? Somebody
Yeah.
wanted to continue it because I had invested 7+ years into this business and into this idea and into this IP and into these products, but I didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And it would have been devastating, I think, for me to just have walked away. I mean, I still would have walked away, but to be able to turn it into something that I actually ended up selling it to a nonprofit. It was like such a fulfilling like end of the story for me on that first business.
Hmm.
And I look at that whole experience less about the sale, more about me learning what business was. Cause I was like 22,
Oh
23 when
wow.
I started that business. And so I didn't even know what business was. I didn't know what online business was. I didn't know what an email list was. This was back when like I started this company with my mom, and we were like, well, what are you supposed to do? Like, are you supposed to like buy an email list? Like you just buy it and then like you have the emails and then like you send them. Like we had
No idea.
no idea, right? Like no idea.
Yeah.
So it was a really cool experience to be able to turn that into a brand that was sellable. And I actually sold it myself. So I didn't even go through a broker. I worked directly with I had built a really fantastic network, both of clients, but also of peers and colleagues. And so I went just direct to my network to sell that business.
That is awesome. And did you sell it for a certain amount, or did you make money in the sale? Like, how did
I
that
did.
place?
So what we did is I actually packaged up I had inventory. It's a little bit of a different type of business than I actually don't work with e-commerce businesses or product-based businesses now for the most part, but
Yeah.
that business we had inventory, we had physical books, and then we had a brand, we had an email list, we had different social media accounts that had followings on them. We had IP in the form of like digital products and those types of things. So I put a value on it and they paid, and then we sent them the books, and
That was it.
they just took the brand. I ended up closing down the actual LLC. So it was just selling the actual IP and the assets and the physical products.
Wow, that's really awesome to have built something, sold it, and building something again. That is really a really good story to tell, and it's inspiring as well because, like you said, even fewer women build and sell. Like
Yeah.
those
A lot of
stories
women
are
just don't
pretty
even
rare.
think that it's like it just doesn't even come up as an option. Like you wouldn't even
Yeah,
consider it, you know?
yeah, absolutely. Well, you've authored a book and you have a top 100 podcast. I want to know how you've been able to like influence entrepreneurs through both of those. Like, how did you get into the writing and podcasting space?
Yeah. So the book itself was in a previous business, but the podcast we started about a year into this business. And I talked earlier about women like feeling like they should do things certain ways. I am the worst about this. If anyone's into Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 1. So literally half the time what's coming out of my mouth is like, what's the right way to do this?
Yeah,
I want
yeah.
to do everything the right way. And I wanted to start a podcast actually in my second business, and I didn't end up starting one. And then I knew I wanted to start one in this business, but it kept feeling like this really big thing, and I wanted to do it right. And eventually it just kind of presented itself as like this perfect opportunity. But we went all in on this podcast launch. And so we did a ton of research on best practices across industries on how do you launch a podcast, not
Mhm.
just how do you like behind the scenes like create the infrastructure to launch the podcast and make sure
Yeah,
you've got the right team in place to manage it for you and like sourcing guests and all of these things, but how do you launch it to be actually received by your ideal listeners
mhm.
and build credibility from the beginning. So like that was a big part of what we did. And we launch podcasts for our clients all the time now because we have a pretty like super like solid SOP on how to do this thing the quote unquote right way.
Yeah.
But the reason that I got into it is I realized eventually that I love to talk. Okay. So I love to talk, and I always joke, I love to tell people what to do. And the easiest part of my job is how I help people is having conversations and
Yeah,
just going back and forth and, helping them get curious and dive into, kind of what's going on in their business and asking questions. And it's something that doesn't feel like work to me. And so a podcast was kind of like an obvious outlet for that.
that's really awesome. Um, when you're I want to know, how do you maintain the momentum and how do you find the time to like do all of these things? Because that's a question that I'm asked, and like how I answer the question is very different. But I always want to know like how do people find the time to be great moms and have kids and run a business and make money and do a podcast and write a book and live and breathe and do hair and all the things. Like, how do you find the time? And how do you
Yeah.
stay like motivated and inspired to keep going?
I think there's a lot of things that go into that. One, most of what I do on a daily basis doesn't feel like work to me. And and so that makes it a lot easier to stay motivated and show up every day. Um, I have learned and I'm constantly practicing really prioritizing time away from work.
Mm,
And I am like not going to be the person that's like I'm so awesome at this. I was terrible at this at the beginning. I was like hustle culture, like workaholic for my first two businesses. I don't deny that. This business I had to build in a different way because I had a 1-year-old when I started it, and then 2 weeks later found out I was pregnant. And so I'm very thankful for that experience, that I was forced into building a business in a very different way than I had ever done that before. So I've had to prioritize myself and time away from work because I've been sick for months at a time and things like that I can't do anything about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've had to build a team. I've had to get really, really good at relying on other people, not just in my business, but also in my personal life. So when I started this business, my first goal, I wanted to be able to afford childcare. That was my first goal. I was like, I don't care how much money I'm making, as long as I'm making enough to be able to afford childcare, because I love what I do, right? And so
Yeah.
that was my first goal. And now over time, like, we've obviously far surpassed making enough for me to afford childcare.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I continue to invest. We just transitioned our nanny from hourly to like full-time salaried household manager. And like that type of stuff, like I wouldn't have been able to fathom doing something like that 3 years ago when I started this business. And so it's not just, it's built over time, I guess. Because I will, like, why I like to put some disclaimers on this is, I remember in my second business, like, desperately wanting childcare and help and not
Yeah.
having it. And so it's not like an overnight thing that just happens. Like, it's taken me years and years and years, and staying committed to like these smaller goals and then like chipping away at them. And now it's like a night and day experience. And I have a ton of support. I have a
Yeah.
20-person team, and I have a household manager and executive assistant and like all of
Yeah.
these things. And so it's really getting the support. But also loving what you do, I think, are both
That's
important.
awesome. That's awesome. I can resonate with you on the support thing, because just even having someone to cook food and do the shopping and do the
Yeah.
laundry and clean the house, like, it's a big time suck. A lot of those things are just a
Hmm.
big time suck, and you can like go through your day and it'll be like, oh, I have to do this, still have to go to the store, still have to do this. So I can totally resonate with that.
Yeah.
um I want to wrap up here and ask you, how can people work with you through easy scaling? You said earlier that it starts with the assessment, but like, if people want to apply, they know they need the COO help, they need to go through all six of these core pieces of scaling, or they just want to like get on the right track to scaling. Like, how can they start working with you at Easy Scale?
Yeah. So definitely first step is go take the BSAT so you can see what's going on. Scaling school is the best option for most women as a starting point. If you're making less than 7 figures, scaling school is probably where you need to be. And so that's our holistic program where we tackle all of the core pillars of the easy scaling method. We've got dozens of coaches and consultants and mentors and experts inside of that program, because we know that you don't just need one thing, you need a bunch of things, and it changes all the time.
Yeah.
So that's usually the best place for people to go, jump in there, and get some really deep support as you're scaling.
Awesome. If you could give us a few minutes of your most valuable advice for entrepreneurs, small business owners, it can be related to what we've talked about or anything else that we've not talked about. We'd love to end the episode with that.
Okay. Um, I think what comes up for me the most often, that is the most consistent, is this concept that I touched on earlier around treating your business like an experiment and treating everything that you do in business like an experiment. I think there's something about the like reduced pressure on you as the business owner when you're looking at your decisions as experiments, rather than trying to get everything right the first time. We haven't gotten anything right the first time ever in our business. It's just, it's not a thing. And so I think looking at all of your ideas as potentially good ideas, trying to get data, trying to figure out as best as you can if it's an idea worth pursuing. So that's where that like zooming out and looking at things holistically comes into play. And then just trying things, putting it out there, not investing every ounce of energy in getting it perfect, but just putting it out there, seeing how it's received, seeing how it works, and then getting some hard data to decide, is this worth us, trying to optimize, or is this not worth our time? And being really honest with yourself about that, and then taking action on that, and then the process kind of starts over from there. That again has been, and my team talks about this all the time, like, it allows us to move so much more quickly. I think it's why we have grown at the pace that we have grown, which is like pretty abnormal in terms of like how quickly you would grow a $500,000 agency. I think it's mostly rooted in that approach of, quick to try things, quick to cut ties with things that aren't working. If the data says it's bad, it's bad. Like, iterate or get rid of it. That approach, I think, would serve most people listening really, really well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jordan, for your time. If you can tell everyone where to find you, you mentioned the website earlier, on social media, any social media handles you have.
Yeah, easyscaling.com is the best place to find us. If you go to our website, all the socials are linked. You can find the BSAT there. Everything that you need is on the website.
Awesome. Thank you for this conversation. This was a really insightful conversation. I'm excited for you, all your future success that is going to happen. You are a beast at this. So good luck. Good luck with the new kid. And we will talk next time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next Tuesday.